or more. Not a joke. Let's be clear. This election is not a referendum. It's a choice between two vastly different visions of America. I've said from the beginning that my objective when I ran for president was to build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out. An economy that rewards work, not just wealth. An economy that works for everybody so the poor have a ladder up, the middle class can do well, and the wealthy will still do very fine. It's a fundamental shift that's working compared to the magna Republican trickle-down economics that Republicans offer these days. No, seriously, just look at the facts. When I took office, this economy was in ruins. My predecessor was the first president since Herbert Hoover to lose jobs during his 4-year presidency. The first president. Unemployment, when we came to office, was 6.4%. Hundreds of thousands of small businesses closed. Remember. And the irony is that during the pandemic, a record number of Americans became billionaires. No, not a joke. There's about 770-some or 50-some billionaires. A whole bunch came along during that pandemic, while 9 million Americans lost their job at the same time. Out of work from the pandemic and Republican politics. Today, we're in a much better place. We got more to do. But 10 million jobs created since I took office. A record. More jobs created at this point than any presidency in American history. Unemployment is not 6.5, but 3.5%, the lowest it's been in 50 years. And 5.4 million Americans applied to start new businesses last year, the highest level ever in American history. Folks, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, which I predicted was going to happen and laid out when it was going to happen, it sent gas prices soaring around the world. And because of the elections we've taken, since the elections, we've taken gas prices down from where they were here at home. They're down $1.25 from their peak this summer, and they've been falling for the last 3 weeks in a row. That's adding up to real savings for American families. The most common price for gasoline across America now is $3.29 a gallon. Back in June, the most common price was over $5 a gallon. We need to keep making progress by having energy companies bring down the cost of a gallon of gas to reflect what they pay for a barrel of oil. I'm not making this stuff up. It's hard to make up. If they were taking the average profit they've been making over the past 20 years instead of these historic profits they're making today, the most common price for gas would come down another 50 cents to under $30. You think that's something? Exxon released its earnings today. You know how much they made in the third quarter? $18.7 billion in 90 days. That's nearly triple what Exxon made last year, and the most it's made in its 152-year history, while the rest of America is struggling. And these companies raise their dividends as well. They say that's how it's getting back to the taxpayers. Wonder how many people in South Philly have that Exxon stock with them. Look, those excess profits are going back to their shareholders and their executives instead of going to lower prices at the pump and give relief to the American people who deserve it and need it. I'm going to keep harping on it. They talk about me picking on them. They ain't seen nothing yet. I mean it. It outrages me. And even though my Republican friends in Congress seem to be hoping for a recession, they were very disappointed. They were very disappointed yesterday. The GDP report showed the economy's growing. It's growing. In fact, the economy grew 2.6% last quarter. And although it may not feel like it to everyone, but people's incomes went up last quarter more than inflation went up. So economic growth is up, price inflation is down, real incomes are up, and gas prices are down. And by the way, exports are also up, which means we're making things here in America. Today, we're shipping American products overseas instead of shipping American jobs overseas. And here's another thing. Remember last time around, that other fellow, we kept hearing about Infrastructure Week. We heard about Infrastructure Week for 4 years. And by the way, it never got done. In fact, it became a punchline. On my watch, with the help of Kamala, folks in this room, we turned in an infrastructure decade outline. We passed the infrastructure bill. We created once-in-a-generation investment on our nation's roads, highways, bridges, railroads, ports, airports, water systems, high-speed internet. By the way, you been to Philadelphia Airport lately? $24 million to improve the main terminal, just a few miles from here. I was just out in Pittsburgh, the city of bridges. $45 million. The bridge that collapsed is about to be reopened because of the infrastructure bill. And made in America. Made in America. The American people are beginning to see the benefits of the economy that work for them. Families have more net worth than they did before the pandemic. Fewer families are behind on their mortgages and credit card bills than before the pandemic. More importantly, Americans have more health care than they ever had before the pandemic, ever. But there's still people hurting. We're doing everything we can for folks to just have a little more breathing room, as my dad used to say. Just a little more breathing room. I can't tell you how good it is. It makes me feel to finally beat Big Pharma and their $1 million lobbyists. Folks, to give Medicare, the power. I say to my former congressman from Philadelphia, remember how hard we fought to take Medicare and get Medicare the ability to negotiate drug prices? We finally did it, and we beat them. Without a single Republican vote. Look, this is a big deal. We've been trying to do it for years because, folks, we pay the highest prescription drug prices of anywhere in the world. That's not hyperbole. Anywhere in the world. The same prescription drug made by an American company, sold in Philadelphia and sold in Paris. That same drug sold in Paris is considerably cheaper. It's cheaper all around the world than it is here in the United States. Made by the same company. We're capping, this is what really excites me. We're capping the out-of-pocket cost on a yearly basis for people on Medicare at $2,000 maximum a year. Even if their bill is $10,000, $12,000, $14,000 a year because they're paying for high-priced cancer drugs. And one more thing. If Big Pharma continues to raise drug prices faster than inflation, they're going to have to write a check to Medicare to cover the difference. And by the way, last year, just to put this in perspective, last year, before we got this law passed, they raised prices on 1,200 prescription drugs. Hear me again. 1,200 prescription drugs, that they manufacture, they raise prices on, faster than inflation. And by the way, it's one thing if you change a drug, you put millions of dollars more in research and you make it better. Not a single change in these drugs. Nothing. No change. We're going to put a stop to that. One more significant change we just made. speaking of putting a stop to it, I don't know how many of you, God forbid, know somebody who has type 1 diabetes, needs insulin. Well, guess what? We're going to cap the cost of insulin per month for people on Medicare to $35 a month. To deal with diabetes, instead of the average of $400 a month that most pay now, it costs $10. $10 to make that drug, and another $5 we give them credit for packaging it. $35 gives them a healthy profit. And by the way, the guy who in fact invented the drug, found it, he decided not to patent it. I talked to him because he wanted everybody to have access to it. So it's not even patented. Anybody can bake it. We also passed tax credits to help families buy energy efficient appliances to lower their costs when everything from the refrigerator to the coffee maker breaks. To put solar panels on your home, to buy an electric vehicle, to weatherize your home. Things that will save, according to the experts, an average family $500 a year. I announced this week my administration is going to get rid of unfair hidden fees called junk fees. You don't know about them until they hit you, and they add up. You have an overdraft in your checking account, $35 they charge on that. Credit card, late fees, $50. These junk fees add up. They're taking real money out of the pockets of average Americans. That's on top of the actions we took earlier this month to lower the cost of hearing aids, make them available over the counter at Walgreens and Walmart, saving $3,000 a pair. $3,000 a pair for those with hearing loss. And the Department of Transportation is working with the airlines to require that the travel sites disclose all the fees up front. How many decided to book a ticket to go see mom or dad at Thanksgiving if they live in a different city? And all of a sudden find out that's going to cost you another $50 for your baggage. Or if you want a child to sit next to you, it's going to cost you another $40. Or if you have to change your ticket, you got to buy a whole new ticket. You don't get to do that. Well, guess what? We're going to end that. Took action to ease the burden of and folks, took the actions I promised I'd do to ease the burden of student debt for millions of working class and middle class people. Over 90% of that debt are people who earn less than $75,000 a year. Republicans, governors, senators, congressmen criticized the move. But I'm never going to apologize for helping working and middle class Americans as they recover from a pandemic, especially not to the same Republicans officials who voted for an unpaid for $2 trillion tax cut, mainly benefiting the super wealthy and big corporations. And I don't want to hear it from MAGA Republicans who sit in the Congress today, their names were published in the press, who got loans for $100,000 or more, up to even $1.1 million. For pandemic relief, the PPP loans forgiven. And those loans are now forgiven. And they're attacking middle-class Americans for a $10,000 break on the cost of their tuition. Give me a break, man. Who the hell do they think they are? I really mean it. Think about it. And by the way, we're doing all this. You know how the Republicans talk about the big spending Democrats? Well, guess what? We're the ones reducing the deficit. You know, the very deficit reduction that all Republicans voted against when they opposed the Inflation Reduction Act. This year alone, just this calendar year, okay? This is official. Democrats and that guy Biden and and that vice president came along and reduced the federal debt by $1.4 trillion. We cut it in half. The largest debt reduction in American history. We've cut the deficit in half. And that's on top of last year, the historic drop in the deficit last year was $350 billion. Folks, we're going to further reduce the deficit over the next decade as well, another $250 billion. And a big part of that is because corporations are finally going to pay a staggering minimum tax of 15%. That's less than a nurse pays, or a firefighter. Folks, and one more thing. On our watch, for the first time in 10 years, seniors are going to get the biggest increase in their Social Security checks they've gotten. Their checks are going to go up while their Medicare premiums go down. I promise you. We'll protect Social Security. We'll protect Medicare. We'll protect you. And all of this is a stark contrast to the state of Republican agenda. You know, when you ask anybody out there who thinks they know politics, what's the Republican agenda? What are they for?